Quran recitation from Brother Muhammad. Brother Muhammad, Bismillah.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والسماء ذات البروج واليوم الموعود وشاهد ومشهود. قتل أصحاب الأخدود النار ذات الوقود إذ هم عليها قعود وهم على ما يفعلون بالمؤمنين شهود. وما نقموا منهم إلا أن يؤمنوا بالله العزيز الحميد الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء شهيد. إن الذين فتنوا المؤمنين والمؤمنات ثم لم يتوبوا فلهم عذاب جهنم ولهم عذاب الحريق. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ذلك الفوز الكبير. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Muhammad. Let's thank him for his Quran recitation with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. As you can tell, I am not surrounded by 100 people who are reciting salawat with me. So I would like to invite you from the comfort of your home to please, every time that I invite you to recite blessings upon the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his blessed family, to join me and to do so at the same time. And what I promise in return is that every time that I'm reciting salawat, I'll imagine that you are doing the same. So thank you for your support in this way. So let's get started. So we're here today with MATIN Talks at Home. And before I go into the details of what is MATIN Talk, what are we going to do today, I just want to quickly throw out there that we are history in the making, because this is the first time we're ever having a virtual MATIN Talks. So thank you for joining us in this journey. So what is MATIN Talks? Some compare it to TED Talk, but we're cooler. Just kidding. They're okay. But point being is that it's like TED Talk in that it's a platform for folks to come up and share their creative ideas and analysis. Often you're judged, there's whole rounds to it, but it's mainly supposed to be a platform for you to come and speak and share your vision. Usually, MATIN Talks is local. So full disclosure, in the past, it's been locally organized in Phoenix and other cities around the country. This time, we're virtual. I guess a blessing of COVID. And so for this round, we are going to join everyone to talk about their creative ideas, but in a virtual format. There's also one other change, and MATIN Talk alumni will also notice this, is that this year, adults and juniors will be participating in separate events. So if you're a junior tuning in and you'd like to see your peers reciting or sharing their ideas, please tune in tomorrow, same time, same place. So there's also one other thing that has not changed, which is that the winners of the MATIN Talks will receive cash prizes, which in my opinion makes this slightly more competitive and a lot more exciting. And so let's talk now about how MATIN Talk works. I would say there's three sort of segments to it, right? The first segment is that you apply, there's an application process. Then there's an invite only round 1. And then finally, top contestants compete in round 2 for those aforementioned cash prizes. The application process includes a talk title, easy, abstract, simple, short biography, headshot image, and a 1-minute video pitch. You submit these. Applications are open to everyone, and I honestly invite you to apply. Round one, so application, round one is invite only. Round one will be invited participants from the application pool. They will be presenting to a panel that is a mix of academics and scholars or ulama. Round two, which is what you are all joining us for today, is when the finalists are invited to compete with one another to win cash prizes. During MATIN Talk Locals, the limit, and you will hear me repeat this a lot throughout today, but the limit for how long you can speak is 10 minutes. MATIN Talks National, which I'll get to in a second, is 12 minutes. So keep that difference in mind. So everyone who you'll be hearing from today has gone through these two and is now in round two. Round one judges, like I mentioned, are made up of scholars and community leaders. But round two judges, and here's the plot twist, is that round two judges are you, literally you. So listen carefully as every contestant speaks, keep in mind the criteria that I will tell you, and make sure to judge them. And I mean that seriously. This is not a judgment-free zone. Judge away, but use the criteria. So what are the criteria? Glad you asked. And if you didn't ask, you should have asked because it's an important question. So criteria one, 10 minutes maximum. Said it earlier, I'm gonna say it again, 10 minutes maximum. Criteria two, clear and effective presentation. This sounds like a broad category, but it's also pretty simple. So I'll leave it for you as a judge to determine what that means. You can also check this as a suggestion. You can check this by making sure that you've understood what was stated and you felt engaged throughout the presentation. Criteria number three is that the talk is organized within an Islamic framework. As someone once explained it to me, we're not looking for sprinkles. You didn't just copy paste the hadith in to make a point that, hi, I'm Muslim and I have an opinion. You're organizing your thoughts and your opinions through an Islamic framework. And this is really important. Finally, you will not be voting after each person speaks because that's wild. Instead, at the very end, after you've heard all three contestants speak, I will share with you the instructions for how to sign in and cast your vote. Okay, so you vote for a winner, that's cool. What does the winner get? Well, I told you, cash prizes, $500 for first place and $250 for second place. And this other piece is crucial. The winners of MATIN Talk Virtual will get automatically put into round one of MATIN Talks National. What does that mean? Remember how I mentioned application, round one, round two? Everyone who wins this round just automatically goes into round one. That doesn't mean that they automatically present on national, right? But they have a chance to compete with others for that national stage. Great, so I've said all of this, and it sounds like maybe some of you are interested in speaking on MATIN Talks, or you know someone. That's awesome, and again, I really encourage it. I think it's really cool. So there's specific ways for how you can get involved. I invite you to tune in throughout the talk, and I will mention those throughout. But in the meantime, if you want to just quickly get looped in, follow MATIN Talks on Facebook and Instagram to get the heads up when applications open. Insider knowledge, it's also publicly known, applications open October 2020. That's this coming October. Great, so let's go over our game plan for how today is going to go down. First, we're going to start with our dear keynote speaker, Dr. Abbas Qasimi. I'll tell you more about who he is shortly. Then you will hear from each of the three contestants. They are each going to speak for 10 minutes, you guessed it. And finally, as you listen, judge them. Judge them based on the criteria. 10 minutes, clear and effective, organized through an Islamic framework. And then finally, after all of these pieces have happened, we will provide a link where you can vote. All right, awesome. So let's get started by hearing from our keynote speaker, Dr. Abbas Qasimi. Let's invite him with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wabihi nasta'een, dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. First and foremost, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the organizers of this event. Your hard work is demonstrated by the effectiveness of the result, and I am truly humbled to be asked to be part of the event. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. May Allah bless you and your family for all your hard work in this front. So when the discussion was coming forth for me to participate in the MATIN talk, the issue that constantly is in front of us as Muslims is that what is the difference between responsibility and accountability, and how does awareness come into this picture? It's a 15-minute time domain that I have, so it's not really, I won't be able to spend tremendous amount of time expounding about these subjects, but it's really noteworthy to talk about these concepts that so often we take for granted. So if you go to someone and say, what is responsibility? A typical answer would be, I have religious responsibility, I have family responsibility. If they really well think into this process and they do some academic work, they're going to come up and say responsibilities are really in three categories. It's either moral responsibility, legal responsibility, or contractual responsibility. The moral responsibility is defined academically as doing good and staying away from doing harm. So do good, no harm. And it is not whether you're doing it in this society or anywhere else. That is primarily the concept of a moral responsibility. The legal responsibility obviously is enforced by the state. So watching for pedestrians, as an example, walking across a green light, it is our responsibility not to hit them if we're driving. And then contractual responsibility is the responsibility that we sign on to when we sign a contract with someone else. So in a great sense, in today's world, that's how we see it. But responsibility is a lot bigger than that. We Muslims have a multi-dimensional set of responsibilities that are in front of us. We have social responsibility, we have professional responsibility, we have religious responsibility, we have family responsibility, we have community responsibility, we have responsibility to ourselves, personal responsibility. We have intellectual responsibility. So when we look at these various elements, if you don't make it comprehensive, it's like a piece of you does not exist. So you begin to look at those and you say, well, how do I know I'm making the right progress towards fulfilling my responsibilities? Well, that's where accountability comes in. So accountability is really a yardstick on how well we do our responsibility. And if you look at it from the philosophical perspective, we're accountable for some of the rights that have been given to us, the rights of not fight the three categories I talked about. If we're morally responsible, we do the wrong thing we do harm, we get some sort of accountability that's correlated to that. And in a great sense, that carries out and goes deeper as Muslims for us. So I want to make sure that I'm staying on time here. So please give me a signal because I have a tendency to go way over. So please. So in a great sense, this set of responsibilities for us Muslims start to get even deeper, and it dives into some other parameters. Like for us, ethics, morals, and values are things that are not all embedded with one another. So we have morals that are embedded in this culture, but we have values that come from our personal relationship with our faith. And that is a boundary condition by which we set up some of our moral boundaries, because ethics sometimes, most often ethics is defined by a social group of people. So, ethical behavior of a police officer as an example. It doesn't have to be moral, it doesn't have to have a value, but it does have to have this organizational structure that they talk about. So for us, these concepts of responsibility begins to take a different shape. And as we are growing in our lives, we start to look at these responsibilities. If we don't understand it, then we think we're not accountable for it, and therefore we don't take the steps to do it the right way. So let me give you an example that is so vivid for me. When you look at a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old person that is in a growth area of their lives, they may be responsible for a limited set of actions, but to a great extent, their accountability varies. It's not the same accountability as for someone who is 30 or 40 or like me over 60 years old. So the accountability starts to take a different shape and form depending on where we are in our social structure, in our personal structure, in our intellectual structure, in these responsibility accounts that we were just talking about. Now, accountability starts to get more deep and more understanding when you start to have awareness. So this is where Quran talks about individuals being aware, having hikmah, having ilm, having knowledge. So when you have awareness, your accountability goes up and you become more, because you understand the consequences of some action. So in Fiqh Jafari, as an example, we have adl ilahi, and adl is based on your comprehension of the amount of knowledge that you're able to extract from this well that exists out there, the amount of goodness that you can take out. So in that process, if your awareness is limited, if you have lower level of comprehension, you'll be accountable to that lower level of accountability. So these three concepts are so deeply embedded with one another. And as we go forward, if we understand it, then we can do a better job of being a better person for ourselves, because we are personally accountable, we're intellectually accountable, we're accountable to our families, we're accountable to our communities, we're accountable. We start to look at these responsibilities and then create accountability. And the more we understand, the more accountable we become. The more aware we are, the more accountable we become. And does it mean other people will give you accolades and thank yous and say, way to go? Not necessarily. When you're accountable to yourself intellectually, it's because you want to feed yourself, and from the intellect perspective. And if you don't feed yourself from your intellect perspective, someone isn't going to come back and say, shame on you. But if you are aware, then it becomes a process by which you become a more well-rounded, comprehensive human being. So to some extent, when we talk about akhlaq as an example, for us Muslims, when we talk about akhlaq, we talk about practice of virtues, morality, that talks about things like Islamic theology and philosophy, manners. When we talk about these kind of things in an Islamic setting, it's because it's really comprehensive understanding of this accountability and responsibility and awareness. And to me, as we begin to get more involved, if you are one of the very fortunate people to have gone through this second round and get to the level you are, this is just the beginning of the journey for you, because you want to look at it and say, yeah, I did really well with MATIN Talk. I went through the first one. Or those of us that are involved in our communities, lecturers, participants, hardworking individuals, the organizers of this MATIN Talk, I'm sure you spend hours and hours on this. And we want to give you gratitude for it. But you want to look at it and say, now that I'm aware in which one of these responsibility categories am I going to be more accountable? And how do I measure a progression for myself? It is almost a litmus test for you to conduct a final exam for yourself. And you may be very victorious as a human being in your intellectual responsibility, fulfilling that and be accountable towards it. But if we don't understand it, we may fail miserably in our social responsibility, or we may fail miserably in our personal responsibility. So if you look at it and say, as a person, I am not taking care of myself, therefore I have obesity as an example, or I have some of the adverse health diseases, is because I didn't understand that was a personal responsibility, and I have to spend enough time and resources to manage that personal responsibility, very similar to the responsibilities that I'm managing in other fronts. So again, I want to leave you with these three concepts and encourage you to look at it from the perspective that we're all responsible in a multidimensional setting. It is not limited to the three that the Western philosophers most often talk about, the moral, legal, and contractual. It's way beyond that. And if we're aware that we are responsible for this, I want to encourage you to begin to create a chart for your accountability. So as an example, how accountable have I been? What have I done? Am I doing the right thing? Am I accomplishing what I said I was going to accomplish? And then as you begin to do well, give yourself grades of 90s and 100s in scale of 100, then you start to say, I need to become more aware. I need to know, as an example, what was it that Quran talks about, those that are having the leadership on doing goodness. And we look at the people that are shuhada as an example, where they have taken the leadership in completing their mission. How did they get aware to the level where they fulfilled their responsibility and then increase their accountability? So I want to once again, congratulate you for making it here. I want to thank every one of the organizers from the bottom of my heart. Sister Malia, I know you've done a lot of work, all the other organizers, you've done terrific amount of work. Brother Muhammad, thank you so much. Your constant texting with me has made me be a very aware human being. So thank you. And again, I am very, very appreciative that you invited me to be part of the Saturday afternoon with you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the event.
Jazakallah khair, brother Dr. Abbas Qasimi. Let's thank him with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. There was a lot to appreciate about that talk, and I want to specifically give a shout out to Dr. Abbas Qasimi's graciousness, really, because I, as the MC, failed to introduce you properly as a speaker should be introduced. And so I think a testament to the fact that, you know, that was not just a talk, that you also walked the walk. Thank you for not boycotting us because I forgot, or even mentioning it that I forgot. So I appreciate that. So if you'll allow me, I'd like to introduce you retroactively. So for all of those who are wondering, Dr. Abbas Qasimi is a professor currently teaching in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at UC Merced. Prior to joining UC Merced, he served as a professor and center director at New Mexico State University. He has extensive expertise in education, as you witnessed, research and outreach in energy resources, including renewable energy, water quality and quantity, and environmental issues, which in these times are particularly salient. Thank you again, Dr. Qasimi, for joining us. I'd like to send a second salawat for him, if we can, as a group. Thank you. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. All right, deep breaths. Here we go. So judges, please prepare your materials, have a way to take notes, whatever you need to be a judge. I won't micromanage you. I literally can't. So remember, watch carefully. The voting link will be available once all presentations are given. First and foremost, I would like to invite our first contestant. I wish that there was a virtual drum roll in this moment. Sister Zainab Haydar from Austin, Texas. You may know Sister Zainab Haydar from her potentially should be world famous food truck called Austin Chaiwala. I don't actually know if it's world famous, but I'm hoping that maybe we can make it world famous. Sister Zainab Haydar lives in Austin, Texas with her husband and her kids, all of whom are under the age of 7. And you'll see how that's relevant during her talk. While her master's is in urban planning, her interest in recent years has been in researching parenting and educational theory. Please join me in inviting Sister Zainab to present to all of you with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I'm really excited to be here. So I wanted to start with a story by Mulana Nabi Abadi in California. And he relates that one day in one of his early years in Qom, he was sitting in the company of Aitullah Behjat. And there were many other visitors there as well. and one of them had a 4 or 5-year-old daughter. So her parents had brought her to Ayatollah Bhejat, and they shared that she had memorized the entire 30 juz of the Quran as well as other surahs, and so they sort of prompted her to recite something, and she seemed very uncomfortable, and her father sort of like harshly indicated to her to begin, and so she recited, and after that Ayatollah Bhejat hugged her and gave her a gift, and then he asked to speak to the parents. So someone took the child away. And then Ayatollah turned to the father and he said, and everyone was expecting, like words of praise. And instead, Ayatollah Bhejat said that I ask for Allah's forgiveness for what I have seen here today. And everyone was stunned. They all thought he was going to thank the father or encourage him. The father was surprised and he asked for an explanation. And the Ayatollah's reply was, the way that you looked at her, the fear that this child has is going to leave a negative impact on her. And this time is for the child to be playing. It's a time of kingship. Instead, you're pressuring her to learn the Quran, and when she's older, she is going to have a hatred towards it and the deen. You need to let her be a child and look at her with muhabbat. And I think this is just an amazing story, and it leads me to say this. Your child under 7 years old does not need school. I want to challenge everything you think you know about academic success, the importance of early reading, and show you that children's biological and fitri needs are not being met. So I'm a huge nerd and I like to research everything. And when I was expecting my first child 4 years ago, I just sort of took it on like a research project. And honestly, I think I researched more for baby than I did for grad school. And so I began reading and going down these rabbit holes. And I started to really question and many of the things that I'd always taken for granted about children, things that are the norm here in America and even in the urbanized East. The biggest parenting method that I began to challenge was school. And I read a beautiful essay called On the Wildness of Children by Carol Black, which I encourage everyone to read. And as I began to read more from authors like John Gatto, I began to understand the system and history of school. And I realized it's actually the mass institutionalization of children. And I know that sounds extreme, but hear me out. So, for 12 years, we forcibly lock children in a building with peers of the exact same age, and then we make them compete against each other. It sounds sort of dystopian, doesn't it? So learning through this adult-directed teaching is pretty new, and it's a new experiment in the history of humanity. It's only a few hundred years old. And it was implemented in the industrial era in order to produce more efficient workers. And in the last few decades, this method of education and standardization has come down to kindergarten and even preschool. And what we know from the creation of schools, this experiment is that it's meant to confine, control, and standardize the child. That's quite the exact opposite of freedom, isn't it? So for all of human history, children were always a part of the adult world. They would watch and learn from their elders. They would play with children of all ages. They would sort of have freedom to roam and explore. And in land-based societies, rural land-based societies, learning is considered a natural byproduct of just living. It's not something that is coerced, right? They don't think that, oh, children won't learn unless we make them. They know that children want to learn. Now I could go on about the problems with school, but I'm going to specifically concentrate on a vulnerable population today, and that's children under 7. And this is the period known as early childhood. You may have heard of the famous hadith in which the noble Prophet ﷺ says, a child is a king for 7 years, a slave for the next 7 years, and an advisor for another 7 years. And we know from science that the most significant brain changes are happening in the brain around age 7. That's when the frontal and temporal lobes, which control cognitive abilities and functions, grow enormously, more than any other time in a person's life. And so we're supposed to treat the child under 7, with love and respect, and like they have the capacity to be kings. But there's sort of a certain level of freedom, right? That's kind of free from the scheduling and coercion and compulsions of children aged 7 to 14. And yet, And yet children today are being pushed and pressured into increasingly more stressful academic expectations, given standardized tests at age 5, and being penned inside all day and deprived from nature. So long term, this is leading to emotional stunting, worse academic performance, and physical development issues. I mean, a lot of long-term preschool teachers are saying that like a third of their students fall out of their seats regularly, and children didn't used to be like this. Top-down teaching instruction, standardized testing, and worksheets sitting at a desk are just inappropriate from a child development perspective. And it's causing a rise in aggression in young children. According to the World Health Organization, being sedentary is just not natural for children, and it causes long-term problems. Most importantly, no study has shown that there's any long-term benefits from earlier introduction of reading or math. In fact, studies outlined in the Alliance for Childhood's Crisis in Kindergarten report says that children who were in these kind of sedentary academic classrooms in kindergarten actually performed worse academically by the time they were in 2nd and 4th grade, and they were emotionally, in terms of their emotional adjustment, they were behind. And so there's no long-term benefit from earlier introduction of math and reading, but there is a harm. And unfortunately, the first lesson that children are learning in school is that they're not good enough. Perhaps most dangerously, academic pressure before age 7 is harmful, as I've been saying. And neuroscientists say that we kill neurons when we stress our children's brain. And play is actually essential for the development of a healthy brain. Unfortunately, many of us don't value play, and we treat it like a waste of time. Play increases cooperation, children's higher level thinking skills, self-control, and there's so many other benefits, too many to name. But thankfully, there are still some play-based programs today. And perhaps most dangerous, what happens with early academic is that it kills children's natural love of learning and the desire for learning. And I think that's just really incredible. You know, school, the very institution that we trust to educate our child, is what's killing the natural love of learning that Allah has already planted in their hearts. And so the Islamic ideal of freedom before age 7 is just not being met, right? Because of cultural and societal norms. There's a lack of understanding in our communities for what freedom is. And I believe that time spent in nature and time that's engaged in free play for long periods of time is a need of the child biologically. There's an author called Richard Louv who's written a good book called Last Child in the Woods, Saving Your Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. And then he says that time spent in nature is not leisure time. It's an essential investment in our children's health as well as our own. Researchers have studied outdoor classrooms, and they found that children were more cooperative, they had less conflict among themselves, they had overall better health. And some of the reasons for this is that they were able to sort of use their outdoor voices, run around, and the abundant natural materials and elements that they were engaged with created less opportunity for not sharing or saying mine. And then when children were playing with sticks, mud, and leaves, they were actually found to be more engaged than with traditional playthings. Research on children's need for nature is clear. It promotes exercise, improves focus, decreases anxiety, builds the brain, and improves a sense of community. And experts are saying that children should be outside for about 4 to 6 hours every day. Unfortunately, research from the National Wildlife Federation says that children are actually on screens for about 7 hours a day and get less than 30 minutes of any kind of unstructured outdoor play. Our children's fitra, that innate inclination within their souls, is drawn naturally towards Allah's creation, right? And we all kind of know that if you're, sitting in a forest of tall pines, reaching up to heaven, you sort of feel in awe of Allah, right? You feel like the splendor and a spiritual depth in that moment. So these kind of moments, this is a creation. This creation is what humanity has always lived in concert with, right? Until recent times. Even just a few generations ago in this country, children sort of had the ability to run around their neighborhood, go into the woods, play in a nearby creek, not come home until dinner time. And a 5-year-old might spend some time, looking at tadpoles, feeling the mud between his toes, the sun on his hair. That's powerful, right? These are the building blocks of the child's brain. And if you think of your own vivid childhood memories, you might find that yours are also in nature. But we have options. We can keep children home. We can enroll them in play-based or outdoor classrooms, even in forest schools. We can take them outside for hours at a time. We can allow them to play and discover even at home without adult direction. We can prioritize play, right? Not interrupting it too much, taking care to treat it as a child's work. And only if the child has been given freedom, allowed mobility and experiences of nature and play, will the child then be able to have developed all the necessary skills, right? Prerequisites for the age of discipline from 7 to 14. And how do we expect our children to listen to us in that time if their haq was freedom before 7 and we didn't give them that freedom? And it's never too late to change things. Times have changed, but our children really haven't, right? So thank you for your time, Jazakallah.
MashaAllah. Let's thank Sister Zainab with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Thank you so much, Sister Zainab, for such an amazing presentation. I think for me, that opening story continues to be a plot twist because I didn't expect Ayatollah Bahjat to be upset. So I appreciate that story. And I think the entire presentation and the real condemnation of sitting in a school for that long and the harms and effects that it has Islamically and psychologically on a child, I think were really powerful and important to listen to. So judges, as you take a moment to note your thoughts and your judgments, again, based on the criteria, I ask that you also continue to tune in because I want to share with you a little bit about national application. So one easy way, like I mentioned earlier, was to follow MATIN Talks on social media. Plus, if you want to check out other MATIN Talk videos, feel free to check them out on Instagram and Facebook. The MATIN Talks team frequently posts past speakers. I recently heard actually that there's one talk by a brother named Alex that compares settler colonialism in the United States with that which Israel is committing against Palestinians. And so safe to say, I clearly bookmarked to watch it and I invite you to do the same. You'll find other talks also that I'm sure are aligned with your interests. So thank you, judges, for taking that time to note your thoughts. And thank you, future potential MATIN Talk contestants, for watching and tuning in and comparing what your ideas are. So let's now move on to our second contestant. I'd like to introduce Sister Mona Jabbar from Calgary, Canada. And yes, we do have an international set of contestants. Thank you for noticing. So Sister Mona was born in Ottawa, Canada, and she now resides in Calgary with her husband and 2 children. Her background is in human resource management, and she has a degree in business. Currently, and this is really cool in my opinion, she's a birth doula, and if you don't know what that is, please look them up. It's a line of work that involves a lot of compassion, and so I highly respect Sister Mona and all of the other folks in that profession out there. So let's now invite Sister Mona with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Mona, and my talk today is about popular culture and the effect it has on spousal selection. So firstly, quickly, why is spouses so important? Well, in order to have a good spouse, this will lead to a successful and fulfilling marriage, which will lead to a happy and successful family and a result in a good society. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Holy Quran, you shall encourage those of you who are single to get married. They may marry the righteous among your male and female servants if they are poor. God will enrich them from his grace. God is bountiful, all-knower. And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam has said that 2 rak'ats of salat of a married person carry more virtue than 70 rak'ats of an unmarried person. Now through this, we can see how important it is to get married. However, in order to achieve all of this and success and happiness, you really want to make sure that you are marrying the right person. Now, why is this so difficult? Well, the influence of pop culture is one of the main reasons. One of the many themes that it's teaching us is that love has no gender. So example of this is homosexuality. They are also showing that gender roles are switching. So what men traditionally do, females are doing now, and vice versa. An example of this is women having multiple partners. Another theme is career-oriented women. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with this, but to have no desire for marriage and choose your career as your ultimate goal in this life rather than a marriage and having children is problematic. And another one of these themes is being child-free. So a lot of women are committing to, from a young age to an old age to everything in between, to growing up with no desire to having children and not wanting any at all. So an issue with popular culture and some of these themes that I mentioned is that it gives us endless options. Okay, so you can marry anyone or anything who's whatever gender, who's neither gender, who's both, or who labels themselves as such anyways. Someone even married themselves. I mean, these kinds of things don't make any sense. Having endless options also make it very difficult for someone to prioritize what it is that they're looking for in a spouse. Are they looking for someone with good morals and characters and values? Or are they looking for someone to kind of join their business venture and help grow their business? I have a great quote here that helps explain that by a Harvard professor who says, "There's too much pressure from my point of view on what a romantic partner should be. They should be your best friend, your lover, your closest relative, your work partner, your co-parent, your athletic partner. There's just so much pressure on the role of a spouse." Now, we should not be looking for all of this when we're looking for a spouse, and we should not either be expecting this from our current spouses. Having too many of these kind of options just misdirect, misguide us, and cause a lot of issues. Now, the importance of a suitable spouse, there's a prophet here, there's a reference here by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who has said, "Be careful what cloak you put around your neck when you choose a spouse." So he's referring to your spouse when he's talking about the cloak here. Be careful and make sure that someone you are choosing is suitable to you. A man had asked the Prophet, "Whom should we marry?" And he replied, "The suitable or matching ones." And what he's referring to is someone who's intellectually, spiritually, and morally suitable to you. Negligence to finding someone suitable, or actually rejecting someone who is suitable to you, or marrying someone who is not suitable, can lead to a delayed marriage. So if you are not obviously accepting good, suitable proposals, if you are getting married to the wrong person, unfortunately, sometimes it will lead to divorce. However, if you stay in that marriage, it can lead to unhappy and fulfilling marriages. And if there are children involved, it can lead to mentally and maybe even physically damaged children as a result. These are all, impacts of marrying an unsuitable spouse. Now, what kind of impact does this have on society? Well, marrying the right spouse, believe it or not, can make or break a society. When you marry the right spouse, as I had mentioned before, this leads to a good marriage, and a good marriage will lead to, if Allah wills, raising good children. And as a result, these children grow out into the world and become members of society that help grow, nurture, and positively impact it. And Islamic law has a huge foundation in governing society in a rightful manner. So some things like hijab and having children, charity and paying taxes. So finding a right spouse and marriage is a great form of impacting society in a great way. A quote here I have from a book by Karmali and Sumar says that family life in Islam begins with his first unit comprising of husband and wife, which becomes a nucleus for future growth. Islam views this unit as an organized social, spiritual, ethical, and economic unit of the society. So this just puts into perspective how great and grave this decision is when you're making a decision to marry someone, and not so much to look so much for your short-term visions and goals. Of course, it's important too. So what should we be looking for? Well, we should be looking for divine guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our creator, and nobody knows better than him what his creation needs. So he has given that to us through the Ahl Bayt alayhim as-salam, through the Holy Quran, and through the Hadiths. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Holy Quran, and one of his signs is that he has created for you spouses from amongst yourselves so that you may take comfort in them, and he has placed between you love and mercy. In this, there is surely evidence of the truth for the people who carefully think. So if we follow the divine guidance, we are able to achieve this love and mercy. So some things that we should be looking for in a spouse that's not through popular media. Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam has narrated that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said, "An intelligent and wise woman should not get wrongly placed, but rightly placed with an intelligent and sagacious man." So again, this goes vice versa and too with the man. So you should find someone who is on the same, intelligent wavelength as you. He has also said, do not marry your daughters to ill-mannered and immoral men. Look for someone with good morals and mannerism. And lastly, he has also said that the one who marries a woman for the sake of beauty only will see many unpleasant things hidden in her. However, that being said, it doesn't mean that being physically attracted to someone is not important. No, being physically attractive to your spouse is important too, just as much as it is to have good health, kindness, and respect. These are all very, important things to look for and justifiable things to look for when you're looking for a spouse. But ultimately, what's the most important is their taqwa and their faith towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the religion of Islam. Now, what are you choosing? I just kind of want you to reflect and think about when we're looking for guidance, are we looking through papers and the magazines and things like advice columns and stories in magazines versus what's written in the Holy Quran? Are we looking at flawed models, role models in Hollywood, like athletes and actors and singer-songwriters, or are we looking at the infallible Ahl Bayt alayhim salam? And lastly, are we getting unrealistic expectations through stories on social media and what people are posting? Or are we looking for expectations and goals from the Sunnah? So I'm just going to conclude quickly by letting you know that, so today we talked about the popular culture and the effect on spousal selection and how it has a result on your marriage, as a result on families, and then eventually on society and so much more. I want you to remember to recognize, understand, and follow the divine law to achieve happiness, harmony, and tranquility. And we must preserve this institution and protect ourselves from these influences. And this here is the reference that I have in many of my slides here. And thank you guys so much for watching. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you so much, Sister Mona. Let's recite a loud salawat for her. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Thank you again to the team in their homes that are reciting salawat with me. I deeply appreciate you. And thank you, Sister Mona, for your thoughtful presentation. I really appreciate the invitation to reflect on ourselves and the impact of society on the way that we think about things, including things like marriage. So judges, please take this moment to note your thoughts and your judgments, again, based on the criteria, 10 minutes, clear and effective presentation, and the presentation is through an Islamic framework. While you do that, a quick note about national competitions. I am mentioning a lot, and I think it's mostly because I want to make sure that you all have all the information you need to make an informed choice on whether or not you want to participate. So real quick, some details about the competition. 1, the content theme has to be Islamic in nature. Again, no sprinkles, like we mentioned earlier. If you're a previous participant, you are more than welcome to apply to compete again, but you must present a different idea or topic. 3rd, there's no age limit on participants, no age cap and no age floor, right? So group presentations are also allowed with a limit of 2 persons per group. And now for our final contestant, I hope judges you're finished with your note taking. For our final contestant, I would like to introduce Sister Sakina Ahsan Kalyan from Torrance, California. Please be aware that after Sister Sakina, you will be asked to cast your votes. Who is Sister Sakina? Great question. I will not skip this person's bio. So Sakina Ahsan Kalyan is a wife and mother of 4 children, also under the age of 7. And before that, she earned her bachelor's in psychology at UC Berkeley and got her master's in education. She currently coordinates a marriage research and development team for Al-Kissa Foundation's Kissa Family Project, and she helps run a matchmaking project on the side. If it wasn't clear, her interests lie keenly in education and family relationship health. And I quote, parenting is her Achilles heel. So let's now invite Sister Sakina with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah. Just a second here. Assalamu alaikum. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد السلام عليكم. When my husband and I were expecting our first child, we took labor and delivery classes, and the advice from the doula was, don't fight it. accept it, submit to it, and work with it. And she was right, alhamdulillah. And then the work of parenting started, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And soon we had 2, and I was still struggling. And then 3, and I was expecting 4. And people started coming up to me saying things like, wow, mashallah, you're such a role model, you're so inspiring. And I kept confessing to some people, actually, this is really challenging for me. And they would just tell me, well, you're doing the best you can. And that would crush me because I knew all the mistakes that I was making at home. And I knew the damage that I was doing, and I couldn't accept that. So I had to start looking around for answers. I discovered a parenting podcast by expert Janet Lansbury, who talks about setting boundaries and children needing their emotions validated. I revisited advice from Sheikh Farouk Sekal-Ashfar, who talked about children's innate fitra and their need to expend energy. And I listened again and again and again to lectures by Sheikh Khalil Jaffer about the end of negative suffering and letting go. And I also sought help from a marriage and family therapist who's also a learned scholar. And slowly puzzle pieces started to fit into place. And it dawned on me that we are parenting all wrong. We are completely missing the focus of parenting in our life. The purpose of parenting in our life is to break our ego. It is meant to be a self-building program that brings us to our knees, forces us to fight our jihad and nafs. And this was so apparent to me when my MFT told me very compassionately, there's never any reason to be angry with a child. And for me, that was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling me, Sakina, why are you trying to fix your kids? I created them. They are as they are. You need to focus on yourself. And this was a game changer for me because this meant that my best today could become better tomorrow. When we miss this focus of what parenting is meant to be, we misunderstand our roles as parents, we use misguided parenting tools, and we misconstrue our own childhoods. I assumed that it was my role to control what my child does. I thought I had to forecast for him what things were going to go wrong. And I thought I had to keep them happy. I had to entertain them and they should be happy. And if that wasn't happening, I was a failure. And boy, I failed a lot. It was very frustrating. I was really demoralized. I remember struggling with my son for over an hour trying to convince him to wear pants because it was freezing outside. We were really late to that dinner party. If I had just let him go outside and see that it's really cold, eventually he would have worn pants. Because the real role of parenting is not these things. The real role is to create for them a role model. It's doing that jihad and nafs. We have to control ourselves. We have to give them information, guidance. They can do the forecast work. And we have to give them encouragement. We have to work in controlling their environment. That's where the work comes. That's the part where we really have to invest time and energy. And when we try to do something else, we're wasting our energy. And then we start to tell ourselves, well, I can only have 1 or 2 kids. But the work comes in studying them, witnessing who they are, and learning about them, and then leveraging that to help them. Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam emphasizes this in Risalatul Huquq when he says that our job is to educate the child in good conduct. Well, you can't educate someone if you're not walking the walk and talking the talk. How can I call my child to honesty when I'm telling him little lies all day long? How can I tell her to be kind when I'm impatient with her? How can I tell my son, you need to be respectful when I'm dismissive? So we need to create that role model and then they will follow. And Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam says, we need to point them into the direction of our Lord and help them obey. This has no sense of controlling them or trying to steer them with our own hands. This is very much helping. It's gentle. When we misunderstand our roles as parents, then we start to use misguided parenting tools. These tools have been used for generations because we've gotten away with it. There have been other structures that have supported us. We've had tight family ties. We've had a sense of village. And that has cushioned the blow. But now that we don't have those things, we're really having to reckon with these tools. Tools like shame and blame. Tools like threatening the child and using our anger against them and distracting them. These all cause damage. When we look at modern child psychology today, we see this, that they tell us these are damaging. And we already knew this when we look at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Ahlul Bayt and how they say to treat a child. It's by leveraging their divine fitrah. It's by giving them respect and love and empathy. It's by reasoning when they're able to reason, and by being patient and giving them presence. I know a story from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he found out that a boy's bird had died. And he said to the boy very gently, "Oh, where's your bird?" He didn't whip out a lollipop and say, "Hey, let's forget about the bird, let's be happy." He gave him the space to grieve. He gave him the gift of presence. When we miss this, and when we start to use these bad parenting tools, it's almost like this. Imagine you're in a car. You're on a road trip. You've got a friend with you, but she doesn't know how to drive. And you think, oh my God, I have to drive the car for her. I have to get out of my car. I'm going to pace a few stoplights, and I have to run back and get her, and I'm going to bring her ahead with me. Baba, stop. What are you doing? Teach her how to drive the car. Show her the parts of the car. Show her the rules of the road. Explain to her what the directions are, where you're going. And then tell her, follow me. But you have your own car to drive. She has her own car to drive. You have your own path. You have to take it. And through that, your child will be able to go on their path. The other way this helps is by looking back at our childhoods. If we could see our own parents work through this perspective, it really helps us to understand that they're deserving of compassion. They may have made some mistakes, but they were also just struggling. But at the same time, it helps us to be critical of some of the techniques they may have used. And all of this will help us to be better parents, because then we can filter out what was right about how I was raised and what needed to change, and how can I implement that with my children. My parents were just going through this just like I am. So if we could just stop this tug of war, if we could really understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us in the Quran, children are a test for you. Are we failing this test? Are we even taking it? We need to think about this and stop fighting that this is the system. This is what it's meant to do for us. How do you start though? You can start by this. You can think about, what are some buttons your children push of yours? Remember, the Ahlul Bayt didn't have buttons. So imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent you this child just to come and push that button so that you know it exists, so you can work on it. Another thing you can do is to think about, what are things you do that set off your child? And what is keeping you from trying a different technique? And the third thing you can do is to think about, what are some habits or attitudes or behaviors of your child that you find unpleasant or not appropriate? Can you do the work of connecting that back to you and seeing yourself as the root of them? These are 3 things you can do to really get down in this work of connecting your parenting with your jihad an-nafs. And if we could really do this work, if we could do the work of jihad an-nafs and make it the self-building program that it is meant to be, then I firmly believe that we can be that ummah that brings back the Imam. He can be in our presence, not because we've taken our children and molded them into this amazing generation, but because we ourselves have shaped ourselves into people who are worthy and deserving of him, submissive enough to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you may be saying, I've considered having a child or 2 and I don't have it in me. And you're right, you don't, but let the child come and build your capacity. Just don't fight it, accept it, submit to it, and work with it. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Let's thank Sister Sakina with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. MashaAllah. Thank you, Sister Sakina, for finishing us off so powerfully. I appreciated the self-awareness in your presentation and the vulnerability of sharing that the work that you are engaged in as a mother is hard work and it's ego-crushing work, as they say. So thank you again for that. I'd also like to say Jazakallah khair and thank you again to all of our speakers, Sister Zainab from Texas, Sister Mona from Calgary, Canada, and Sister Sakina from California. I also want to mention that it's not easy to present without an audience in the room with you. And so hats off to you, or in Muslim terms, let us gift them the more meaningful gift of sending blessings upon the Prophet and his family. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. All right, judges, I am proud of each of you and the work that you have put in to be fair and just in your evaluations of each speaker. And as a friendly reminder, the criteria for voting was 10 minutes, clear and effective presentation, Islamic paradigm. So now it's going to be time to cast your votes. There should be a banner directly below on this screen, and you will follow the instructions below. I know that I've heard that there's other elections coming up, and those are making it into the news. This election will likely not make it in the news, but it's the one that matters. So go ahead, cast your vote. Don't forget that the prizes for the first place winner is a cash prize of $500 and the second place winner $250. Both winners will automatically be entered into round one. That doesn't mean that they're guaranteed a spot on the national stage, but it means they don't have to go through the application process in the way that the rest of us will have to. So please go to mentimeter.com, enter the code written on the banner. You will have 3 quality minutes to cast your vote. And once your time ends, you will not be able to vote. So friends, this is not the time to procrastinate. While you vote, we're going to be playing a quick video for you to enjoy. Thank you so much. And let's transition with a salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum.
some that are here the first time, MATIN Talk gives you a platform to bring your ideas, to bring your creativity, to present in a format that you want.
Welcome back. Thank you for enjoying that transition video with us. I hope that some of you at least were able to spot a friend or two. We are now ready to announce our results, but before we do that, I would like to first thank all of the contestants. Again, this was not easy, and this was probably a first time for a lot of us, and so we appreciate the work that you've put in. I'd also like to thank our keynote speaker, Dr. Abbas Qasimi, and thank you again for your graciousness. I'm not 100% sure that graciousness is a word, so I hope that you'll bear with me if it's not. And last but not least, I would like to remind you all about MATIN Talks National. I mentioned earlier the criteria, but I'd like to let you know that this video is not the only place where you can get information about it. If you go to matintalks.com, spelled exactly how it's spelled on this video, you can find more information on the national competition. And again, I invite you all to apply, while the winners of this online virtual program will be able to automatically get entered into round one. For the rest of us, us plebeians, we need to submit our application materials by the deadline. And I know that sometimes it can be hard to keep track of those deadlines, so I have two suggestions for you. The first suggestion is to follow MATIN Talks on Facebook and Instagram, and you will get an update. You'll see the post when they're going to open the competition to applications. The second option, and this is, I think, a great idea, personally. One is you can go onto the website and nominate someone to speak. So if you think that there's someone in your life or your community who you think would make a strong speaker and a strong contestant, we invite you to nominate them. And we ourselves will go ahead and email them and invite them ourselves to participate and to apply. The second piece that you can also do is to nominate yourself. And I know that sounds a little bit conceited, but in fact, I'm 100% in full support of you advocating for yourself. If you feel like you have a creative idea and a strong presentation that you want to reach a broad audience, then you should take that step forward and nominate yourself. Great. So now for the time and the moment we have all been waiting for. I know this isn't the Oscars, so I mean, and it's less problematic, so that's good. But I put the results in this Quran, and so I'm going to open it, and we're gonna find out. You're wondering how I got from Mentimeter to my Quran, and I won't tell you. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First, before I tell you all who won, let's recite a loud salawat for all of them. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Regardless of the results, we are grateful for the energy and the adrenaline rushes that you have put into this work, and we appreciate you. All right, so, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. For our first place winner, we have Sister Sakina Ahsan Kalyan. Let's recite a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. I'm imagining that all four of her kids are also reciting salawat with us. Thank you, Sister Sakina, well done. In second place, we have Sister Zainab. Let's recite a loud salawat for Sister Zainab. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. And finally, Sister Mona, thank you so much for engaging in this competition with us. This, honestly, it was hard. I'm really glad I was not a judge and I was only an MC. I had the easiest job from everyone. So thank you again. And last but not least, can we also recite a loud salawat for all the people behind the scenes? This includes the audience judges, but also the people who have made MATIN Talks possible. I was not one of them. So let's recite a loud salawat for them. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Thank you again for joining us. We hope to see you tomorrow for our junior division, where we will be hearing from 4 contestants, inshallah. All right, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Take care.